Rain swept across the towering windows of Ashford Manor like restless fingers tapping upon glass. Beyond the estate, autumn winds bent the ancient trees and scattered gold leaves across the darkened grounds. The sky hung low and gray over the countryside, as though even the heavens had chosen to mourn. Inside the manor, every corridor seemed quieter than it had ever been before. Servants lowered their voices. Footsteps softened. Candles flickered against black mourning drapes that covered walls once bright with celebration. Only 3 weeks earlier, those same halls had echoed with laughter. Now they echoed with grief. Duke Nathaniel Ashford stood alone beside a nursery window, his broad shoulders rigid beneath a black coat. He had not slept properly since the day his wife died. The reflection staring back at him from the rain-streaked glass looked older than 36. Shadows darkened his eyes. Sorrow had carved itself into every line of his face. Behind him, a cradle rocked gently. Inside lay baby Leo Ashford, the child who had cost Isabella her life. Nathaniel turned at the sound of a weak cry. Leo's tiny face twisted with distress. His little fists opened and closed helplessly as he searched for comfort that never seemed to come. The Duke crossed the room immediately and lifted his son into his arms. The crying only grew louder. A sharp pain tightened around Nathaniel's chest. He loved the child. God knew he loved him. But every time he looked into Leo's eyes, he saw Isabella's final moments. The memory never released him. He still remembered kneeling beside her bed while rain battered the manor roof. He remembered her pale smile. The trembling hand she had placed against his cheek. The whispered words she had spoken while struggling to breathe. "Take care of our son." Hours later she was gone. The greatest love of his life had vanished before sunrise. A knock interrupted his thoughts. The nursery door opened. Dr. Whitmore entered carrying a grim expression that Nathaniel had come to recognize all too well. The Duke needed no explanation. The news would be bad. Again. "The latest wet nurse has failed," the doctor said quietly. Nathaniel closed his eyes. That made 17. 17 women from respected families and estates. 17 failures. Leo refused every one of them. Some babies resisted strangers at first. Leo resisted everyone. Whenever a nurse attempted to feed him, he cried until exhaustion overcame him. Sometimes he refused nourishment entirely. Other times he accepted only enough to survive another day. The doctor stepped closer to the cradle. "The child is weakening." The words struck harder than any sword. Nathaniel looked down at his son. Leo seemed impossibly small beneath the blankets. Far too fragile. Far too precious. "What are you saying?" Nathaniel asked. The doctor hesitated. Then he answered honestly. "If something does not change soon, I fear for his future." Silence settled over the room. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Nathaniel felt the ground shift beneath his world. He had buried his wife. He could not bury his son. After the doctor departed, the Duke remained beside the cradle until evening shadows filled the nursery. When darkness arrived, another visitor entered. Dowager Duchess Eleanor Ashford. At 65, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Silver hair framed a face marked by wisdom rather than age. She had survived enough heartbreak to recognize it instantly in others. She crossed the room and touched her son's shoulder. "You cannot save him by suffering beside him." Nathaniel gave a bitter laugh. "I failed Isabella." "No." His mother spoke firmly. "You loved her." The words nearly broke him. For a moment, he looked like a grieving husband rather than one of England's most powerful men. Eleanor glanced toward Leo. "He still needs you." Nathaniel followed her gaze. The infant had finally fallen asleep. His tiny chest rose and fell unevenly. Fear gripped the Duke with renewed force. For the first time in his life, power felt useless. Titles could not heal grief. Wealth could not feed his son. Days passed. Then weeks. Doctors arrived from London. Specialists came from distant counties. Nurses traveled from every corner of England. Each departure left Ashford Manor more hopeless than before. Rumors began spreading beyond the estate. At first, they moved quietly through drawing rooms and tea parlors. Then they reached newspapers. Soon the entire kingdom knew the tragedy of Ashford Manor. People whispered that the heir might not survive infancy. They whispered that the Duke would eventually require a new wife. They whispered many things. Among those listening was Lady Beatrice Montrose. Beautiful, wealthy, and fiercely ambitious, she attended every social gathering where Nathaniel's future was discussed. While others expressed sympathy, Beatrice calculated possibilities. If the Duke remarried, someone would become the next Duchess of Ashford. She intended that someone to be her. The opportunity arrived sooner than anyone expected. A month later, nobles from across England gathered at a magnificent royal celebration in London. Crystal chandeliers illuminated vast marble halls. Musicians filled the air with elegant melodies. Silk gowns shimmered beneath golden light. Yet conversation centered on only one subject: the Ashford heir. Nathaniel arrived late. When he entered the ballroom, every voice seemed to fade. The Duke looked thinner than before. Grief followed him like a shadow. For several minutes he endured condolences and polite conversation. Then, without warning, he stepped onto the grand staircase overlooking the crowd. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. The ballroom became utterly silent. Nathaniel's gaze swept across assembled nobles. Then he spoke. "My son is dying." Gasps rippled through the hall. He continued before anyone could respond. "Doctors have failed. Nurses have failed. Every solution has failed." Pain flashed across his face. For one vulnerable moment, he looked not like a duke but simply a desperate father. Then came the announcement that would shake an entire kingdom. "The woman who can feed my son and save his life," he declared, his voice carrying through the vast ballroom, "will become my Duchess." Shock exploded across the gathering. No one moved. No one breathed. And hundreds of miles away, in a small village hidden among rolling hills, a quiet young woman named Vivienne Hartwell paused while hanging laundry beneath a gray sky. Nearby, travelers repeated the Duke's astonishing promise with excitement and disbelief. Vivienne listened for only a moment before lowering her eyes and returning to work. Yet something in her expression changed when she heard the name Leo Ashford, as though the child belonged not to a stranger, but somehow to a forgotten chapter of her own life. The Duke's declaration traveled through England faster than winter wind across open fields. Newspapers printed it in bold ink. Merchants discussed it beside market stalls. Aristocrats debated it inside glittering drawing rooms. Every conversation eventually returned to the same astonishing promise. The woman who saved baby Leo Ashford would become Duchess of Ashford. Within days, carriages began arriving at the estate. They came from every direction. Young noblewomen arrived wearing expensive gowns and carefully rehearsed smiles. Widows arrived carrying impressive family names. Daughters of powerful earls arrived accompanied by ambitious mothers who could practically see a coronet resting upon their daughters' heads. Ashford Manor transformed into something between a royal court and a competition. Nathaniel hated every moment of it. Each morning he watched strangers parade through his home while his son continued growing weaker. Each evening another hopeful candidate departed in disappointment. The nursery had become the center of everyone's attention. Yet Leo remained stubbornly indifferent to their efforts. The moment unfamiliar arms lifted him, he cried. The moment a woman attempted to feed him, he turned away. No amount of gentleness changed anything. No amount of patience succeeded. The child simply refused. Lady Beatrice Montrose quickly established herself as the strongest candidate. She was beautiful, polished, and perfectly aware of it. Her elegant gowns seemed chosen specifically to impress the household. Her smiles appeared whenever Nathaniel entered a room. Her sympathy for Leo never seemed entirely genuine. Still, many believed she would eventually become Duchess. After all, she possessed everything society valued: rank, beauty, influence, everything except the one thing Leo appeared to need. One afternoon she entered the nursery carrying a confident expression. The room watched hopefully. Perhaps this time would be different. Beatrice sat gracefully in a rocking chair while a nurse carefully placed Leo in her arms. For one brief second the baby remained quiet. Then he began screaming. Not crying. Screaming. His tiny face reddened with distress. His body trembled. The sound filled the nursery like a warning bell. Beatrice's confidence vanished almost instantly. After several painful minutes she surrendered him back to the nurses. Leo calmed only after she left. The silence that followed felt humiliating. Nathaniel turned away before anyone could see the disappointment in his eyes. Another failure. Another lost hope. The weeks continued. The manor slowly filled with frustration. Doctors spoke in increasingly cautious tones. Servants whispered prayers. Even Dowager Duchess Eleanor struggled to hide her concern. One rainy morning, while another group of candidates prepared to present themselves, a lone carriage arrived at the servants' entrance. No one paid much attention. Unlike the noblewomen, its passenger carried no expensive luggage. No footmen accompanied her. No elaborate introductions preceded her arrival. The young woman stepping from the carriage wore a simple traveling cloak and carried only one small case. Her name was Vivienne Hartwell. At least that was the name she provided. The housekeeper studied her application carefully. You seek employment? Yes. As what? Any position available. The answer seemed sincere. Vivienne's voice carried quiet confidence rather than desperation. She did not mention the Duke. She did not mention the promise. She certainly did not mention becoming Duchess. Unlike many people arriving at Ashford Manor, she appeared interested only in work. The housekeeper eventually assigned her temporary duties assisting with laundry and household organization. Vivienne accepted gratefully. Within hours she blended almost invisibly into the staff. Yet several servants noticed something unusual. She treated everyone kindly. She listened more than she spoke. She never gossiped. Most surprising of all, she seemed untouched by the excitement consuming the estate. Meanwhile, Leo's condition continued worsening. That evening another nurse failed. Then another. Nathaniel spent most of the night beside the cradle. The child barely slept. Neither did his father. The following afternoon rain drummed softly against the nursery windows while Leo cried once again. The sound echoed through nearby corridors. Most servants had become accustomed to hearing it. Vivienne had not. She paused while carrying folded linens. The cry pierced straight through her heart. Something about it felt unbearable. She stood motionless outside the nursery door. Another cry followed. Then another. Each one sounded smaller than the last. More exhausted. More desperate. Without understanding why, Vivienne found herself walking toward the sound. A nurse emerged from the nursery looking frustrated. "He will not stop," the woman muttered. Vivienne hesitated. Then she spoke quietly. "May I try?" The nurse blinked. "You?" Embarrassment touched Vivienne's face. "I only thought perhaps holding him might help." Normally the suggestion would have been dismissed immediately. But desperation had weakened everyone's resistance. The nurse shrugged. "It cannot make matters worse." Moments later Vivienne stepped inside. Nathaniel stood near the window. Eleanor sat beside the cradle. Both looked exhausted. Neither paid much attention to the unfamiliar servant. Their focus remained entirely on Leo. The baby continued crying. Vivienne approached slowly. She did not rush. She did not speak loudly. She simply extended her arms. Something remarkable happened. The moment Leo was placed against her chest, the crying stopped. Completely. Silence filled the room. No one moved. No one spoke. Leo blinked up at her with wide blue eyes. His tiny hand reached toward her collar. Then he relaxed. A deep, peaceful calm settled over him. Nathaniel stared in disbelief. The nurses exchanged stunned glances. Eleanor slowly rose from her chair. Vivienne herself looked confused, as though she could not understand what had happened either. The baby nestled closer against her. A small sigh escaped him. For the first time anyone could remember, he looked content. Minutes later an even greater miracle occurred. Leo finally accepted nourishment. No tears. No resistance. No fear. The child who had rejected every nurse in England fed peacefully in Vivienne's arms. Several nurses began quietly crying. One doctor removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes as though convinced he was imagining the scene. Nathaniel remained frozen. Weeks of helplessness shattered inside him. Relief struck with such force that he struggled to breathe. His son was finally eating. His son was finally safe. For the first time since Isabella's death, hope entered the nursery. As evening settled over Ashford Manor, Leo slept soundly against Vivienne's shoulder while golden firelight flickered across the room. Nathaniel watched from nearby, unable to look away. He should have felt only gratitude. Instead, a strange sense of recognition stirred deep within him. It was not Vivienne's face that unsettled him. It was the expression on his son's sleeping face. Leo looked exactly as he had looked in Isabella's arms. Across the room, Eleanor noticed the same thing, and a quiet uncertainty entered her eyes, as though fate had just reopened a door everyone believed had been sealed forever. The transformation began so gradually that few people noticed it at first. Ashford Manor had spent weeks wrapped in grief, its corridors heavy with silence and mourning. Yet as days passed, a subtle warmth returned to rooms that had long felt abandoned. It started in the nursery. Baby Leo no longer spent his days crying. Instead he laughed. The sound seemed almost miraculous. Servants paused outside doorways simply to hear it. Nurses smiled whenever it echoed through the halls. Even the old grandfather clock in the east wing appeared less lonely when laughter accompanied its steady ticking. At the center of that change stood Vivienne Hartwell. Leo adored her completely. Whenever she entered a room, his face brightened. Whenever she left, his eyes followed her. He reached for her instinctively, as though some invisible bond connected them. One morning, Nathaniel entered the nursery to find Leo balanced carefully on Vivienne's lap while she read from a children's storybook. The baby was far too young to understand the words. Still, he watched her with complete fascination. Vivienne looked up and smiled politely. "Good morning, Your Grace." Nathaniel found himself returning the smile before realizing he had done so. "Good morning?" The exchange lasted only seconds. Yet afterward he carried it with him throughout the day. That realization unsettled him. For months, every thought had belonged to grief. Now other thoughts had begun appearing. Thoughts he had not expected. Thoughts centered around a woman with gentle eyes and a quiet voice. He told himself it was gratitude. Nothing more. Yet the explanation felt increasingly inadequate. Meanwhile, Dowager Duchess Eleanor observed everything. Age had taught her that human hearts often revealed themselves long before their owners recognized the truth. She noticed how Leo calmed whenever Vivienne entered a room. She noticed how servants naturally sought her company. Most importantly, she noticed how Nathaniel watched her. Not with desire. Not yet. But with growing admiration. The kind that often arrived first. As autumn deepened, the manor continued changing. Vivienne possessed a rare gift for making people feel seen. She remembered servants' names. She listened when others spoke. She thanked workers whose efforts usually went unnoticed. Within weeks, the household felt less like a collection of employees and more like a family. Even long-standing disagreements among servants quietly disappeared. People simply behaved better around her. No one understood exactly why. One rainy afternoon, Leo developed a mild fever. The nursery immediately descended into concern. Doctors arrived. Nurses hurried back and forth. Nathaniel remained beside the cradle for hours. Throughout it all, Vivienne stayed calm. She sat beside Leo and sang softly while pressing a cool cloth against his forehead. The melody was unfamiliar, simple, gentle, yet strangely comforting. Nathaniel listened from across the room. Something about the song stirred a distant memory, a sensation rather than a recollection. Before he could identify it, the feeling vanished. The fever broke before dawn. Relief swept through the household. Life resumed. But Nathaniel could not forget the melody. Days later he finally asked about it. Vivienne hesitated before answering. "My mother used to sing it." The response carried unexpected sadness. For the first time, Nathaniel realized how little he actually knew about her. She rarely spoke of her past. She never discussed family. Whenever conversations approached personal subjects, she gently redirected them elsewhere. The mystery intrigued him. One evening, while organizing estate documents in a neglected study, Eleanor made an unexpected discovery. A small locked compartment hidden within Isabella's writing desk. The desk had remained untouched since the Duchess's death. Neither grief nor necessity had permitted anyone to examine it closely. Now, curiosity overcame hesitation. After considerable effort, the compartment opened. Inside rested a sealed envelope. Nothing else. Eleanor immediately recognized Isabella's handwriting. Her heart began beating faster. She carried the letter directly to Nathaniel. The Duke stared at the envelope in stunned silence. Months had passed since he had seen his wife's handwriting. Even now it felt painfully familiar. His fingers trembled slightly as he broke the seal. The room became silent. Eleanor waited beside him. Slowly, Nathaniel began reading. At first the letter contained personal memories. Words of love. Words of gratitude. Words intended for a husband facing life without her. Tears gathered in his eyes. Then the letter shifted. His expression changed. Confusion appeared, followed by disbelief. Then astonishment. "What is it?" Eleanor whispered. Nathaniel continued reading. The answer came moments later. Years earlier, during a brutal winter storm, Isabella's carriage had overturned while traveling through a remote forest road. The accident had nearly killed her. One wheel shattered. The coachman was injured. Snow fell so heavily that rescue seemed impossible. According to Isabella's letter, help arrived from an unexpected source. A young woman traveling nearby. A woman who ignored the danger. A woman who stayed through the entire night. A woman who kept Isabella alive until rescuers arrived at dawn. Nathaniel's eyes widened. His pulse quickened. The name written on the page seemed impossible. Vivienne Hartwell. For several seconds neither he nor Eleanor spoke. The silence felt enormous. Then Nathaniel resumed reading. The final paragraphs had clearly been written shortly before Isabella's death. The handwriting appeared weaker, more fragile. Yet every word remained unmistakably deliberate. If fate ever separates me from our son, trust Vivienne Hartwell. Nathaniel swallowed hard. The next sentence nearly stole his breath. She possesses the gentlest heart I have ever known. Emotion flooded the room. Isabella had written those words years before Leo's birth. Years before her illness. Years before anyone could have predicted the circumstances now unfolding. The coincidence felt almost unbelievable. Or perhaps not coincidence at all. Nathaniel immediately requested Vivienne's presence. She arrived moments later, unaware of what awaited her. When she entered the study, she sensed the unusual atmosphere immediately. Concern flickered across her face. Has something happened? Nathaniel rose slowly. The letter remained in his hands. Why did you never tell us? Recognition appeared in her eyes before he even explained. She glanced toward the envelope. Toward Isabella's handwriting. Then she understood. For several moments she remained silent. I never wanted recognition, she said softly. That is not an answer. Vivienne lowered her gaze. The Duchess thanked me many times. I told her it was unnecessary. Nathaniel stared at her. You saved her life. A faint smile touched her lips. Anyone would have done the same. Both Nathaniel and Eleanor knew that was not true. Many people claimed kindness. Far fewer practiced it when sacrifice became necessary. The realization settled heavily over the room. The woman who had saved Leo was also the woman who had once saved Isabella. The woman his son trusted completely was the same woman his wife had trusted above all others. For Nathaniel, the discovery felt strangely overwhelming. As though invisible threads were finally revealing a pattern hidden for years. Vivienne quietly excused herself soon afterward. She seemed uncomfortable with praise. When the door closed behind her, neither Nathaniel nor Eleanor spoke immediately. Both remained absorbed by the significance of what they had learned. Unfortunately, they were not the only ones. Beyond the partially open study door, hidden within the shadows of the corridor, Lady Beatrice Montrose slowly withdrew her hand from the wall. She had heard enough. Far more than enough. As she walked away, jealousy burned behind her elegant smile. For the first time she understood the truth. Vivienne Hartwell was no longer merely a servant who had saved a child. She was becoming impossible to remove from Nathaniel Ashford's heart, and Lady Beatrice had already decided exactly what she intended to do about it. Lady Beatrice Montrose understood something dangerous. The greatest threats rarely arrived with armies. Sometimes they arrived with kindness. The morning after overhearing Isabella's letter, she sat before her mirror while servants arranged jewels in her hair. Her reflection remained flawless, yet irritation simmered beneath the surface. For months she had carefully positioned herself as the future Duchess of Ashford. Society expected it. Her family expected it. Now a servant threatened everything. Worse, she was a servant everyone admired. Beatrice knew admiration could become affection. Affection could become love. Love could become marriage. She intended to stop that transformation before it was complete. The rumors began quietly. A suggestion here. A whisper there. Questions disguised as concern. By the end of the week, noblewomen throughout London repeated the same story. Vivienne Hartwell was manipulating the grieving Duke. She had deliberately gained Leo's trust. She had somehow planned everything. The accusations were absurd. Unfortunately, society rarely required truth to sustain a scandal. The story spread quickly. Visitors arriving at Ashford Manor carried curiosity hidden behind polite smiles. Conversations fell silent whenever Vivienne entered a room. Servants loyal to Beatrice began repeating cruel gossip. The atmosphere within the estate slowly changed. Vivienne noticed immediately. People who once greeted her warmly suddenly became distant. Others stared openly. Some avoided her entirely. Though she never complained, the hurt became increasingly difficult to ignore. One afternoon, while arranging flowers in a drawing room, she entered unexpectedly as several noblewomen discussed her. The women stopped speaking. Their expressions revealed enough. Vivienne quietly finished her task and left. Not one of them apologized. The humiliation lingered long after the conversation ended. Meanwhile, Nathaniel remained unaware of the campaign unfolding around her. Estate matters demanded his attention. Legal responsibilities pulled him away from the manor more frequently. Whenever he returned, Leo occupied most of his focus. The child continued thriving. His cheeks grew healthier. His laughter grew louder. Every improvement deepened Nathaniel's gratitude toward Vivienne. That gratitude was becoming something more complicated. Something he carefully avoided naming. One evening, Eleanor found Vivienne alone in the garden. Winter approached. Cold winds carried fallen leaves across empty pathways. Vivienne stood beside a stone fountain, staring at dark water. The older woman immediately recognized sadness. "You have been crying." Vivienne attempted a smile. It failed. Eleanor moved beside her. "Tell me." For several moments Vivienne remained silent. Then the words emerged. "The estate would be happier without me." "No." The answer came instantly. Vivienne lowered her eyes. "The rumors are hurting everyone. They are hurting you." A painful silence followed, because both women knew the statement was true. The following week brought greater cruelty. At a charity gathering in town, several noblewomen openly mocked Vivienne's background. One questioned whether servants now expected to become duchesses. Another laughed. Others joined. The comments reached Nathaniel eventually. His anger was immediate. He wanted names. He wanted explanations. Most of all, he wanted to defend Vivienne publicly. Yet when he approached her, she surprised him. "Please don't." Nathaniel stared at her. "They insulted you." "I know." "Then why should I remain silent?" Vivienne's expression softened. "Because I don't want more conflict." The answer frustrated him. But it also revealed something important. She genuinely cared about protecting the family from scandal, even at her own expense. That realization only deepened his respect. Unfortunately, respect could not silence society, nor could it erase Vivienne's growing guilt. Each cruel rumor convinced her further that she had become a burden. She began imagining life after Ashford Manor, a life somewhere else, a place where no one knew her name, a place where Leo would eventually forget her. The thought broke her heart. Still, she convinced herself it was necessary. The decision formed gradually. Then suddenly, one night, long after the manor slept, Vivienne packed her belongings. The small case she had arrived with sat open upon her bed. There was little to place inside. A few dresses, a few books, several treasured letters. Nothing more. She paused while folding Leo's favorite blanket. The child had fallen asleep holding it countless times. Tears filled her eyes. For several moments she could not continue. Leaving felt impossible. Remaining felt selfish. She wrote a farewell letter to Eleanor. Another to Nathaniel. The longest one was for Leo. Though he was too young to read it, she wrote anyway. Every word carried love. Every sentence carried heartbreak. When the letters were finished, dawn remained hours away. She intended to leave before sunrise. Quietly. Without goodbyes. Without creating another scene. Then a scream shattered the silence. The sound echoed through the manor. Vivienne froze. Another scream followed. Then hurried footsteps. Doors opened. Voices filled the corridors. Something was terribly wrong. She rushed outside her room. Servants ran through the hall. Panic covered every face. "What happened?" she asked. No one answered immediately. Then a nurse appeared. Her face had gone completely white. The woman could barely speak. The nursery. Fear exploded inside Vivienne. She ran. The corridor seemed endless. People crowded the doorway when she arrived. Nathaniel stood in the center of the room. For the first time since Isabella's death, true terror dominated his expression. The cradle was empty. Completely empty. Vivienne's pulse stopped. No, no, no. The blanket lay abandoned. A nursery window stood open. Cold air swept through the room. Leo was gone. The realization struck everyone simultaneously. Someone had taken him. Chaos consumed the estate. Guards were summoned immediately. Horses prepared. Search parties organized. Every minute felt catastrophic. Nathaniel barked orders while fighting panic. Eleanor prayed. Servants searched every corner of the property. Hours seemed to pass within minutes. Then investigators discovered something alarming. One stable servant had disappeared. So had a horse. The conclusion became unavoidable. The kidnapping had been planned. Someone had taken Leo intentionally. News spread through the manor like wildfire. A reward would undoubtedly follow. Enemies of the Ashford family would pay generously for the heir. The possibilities were horrifying. Yet while others focused on fear, Vivienne noticed something different. A muddy footprint beneath the nursery window. A broken branch beyond the garden wall. Signs everyone else overlooked. Without hesitation she followed them. No one noticed her departure. The estate remained consumed by panic. Rain began falling shortly after midnight. Heavy clouds swallowed the moon. The countryside disappeared beneath darkness. Still, Vivienne continued moving forward. Every instinct pushed her onward. Every heartbeat carried one desperate thought. Find Leo. Miles behind her, Ashford Manor searched frantically in every direction. Nathaniel believed the kidnappers remained close to the estate. The guards believed they were heading toward London. The investigators believed they still had time. None of them knew the truth. Far ahead, beyond rain-soaked fields and blackened woods, a lone lantern flickered through the storm. Wrapped in a stolen blanket, baby Leo cried weakly in unfamiliar arms. And closer to him than anyone realized, soaked by rain and driven by determination stronger than fear, Vivienne Hartwell followed the sound into the darkness. Rain lashed across the countryside with relentless fury. Wind bent trees until their branches groaned beneath the storm. Mud swallowed the narrow road winding through the darkness. Somewhere beyond the black woods, baby Leo cried weakly, his frightened voice carried away by the rain. Vivienne followed it. Her cloak was soaked through. Her boots slipped repeatedly against the muddy ground. Still she refused to stop. Every moment mattered. Every second placed Leo farther from home. The storm concealed most traces left by the kidnapper, yet small clues remained. A broken fence rail. Fresh hoofprints. Deep impressions left by a horse struggling through wet terrain. Vivienne pressed forward. Hours seemed to pass. Then she saw it. A faint lantern glow flickering between distant trees. Her heart slammed against her ribs. Leo. The light moved slowly, carefully, as though someone wished to avoid detection. Vivienne left the road and entered the forest. Cold branches scratched her hands and face. Wet leaves clung to her dress. The storm muffled sound, forcing her to rely on instinct alone. Then she heard it. A cry. Tiny. Exhausted. Leo. Relief nearly brought tears to her eyes. She hurried toward the sound. The kidnapper appeared moments later. The missing stable servant sat astride a horse near an abandoned hunting cabin. Leo was wrapped inside a blanket across the man's chest. The baby was alive. That was all Vivienne cared about. Without thinking, she stepped into view. The servant froze. Shock crossed his face. You? Vivienne ignored the question. Give him back. The man laughed nervously. You should have stayed at the manor. Leo cried again. The sound strengthened her courage. Give him back. The servant glanced toward the forest. Toward freedom. Toward whatever reward awaited him. Then he tightened his grip on the child. No. The answer hardened something inside her. Vivienne had spent her entire life avoiding conflict. She had endured gossip, humiliation, cruelty. She had remained gentle through all of it. But Leo was not merely the Duke's heir. He was family. The servant attempted to turn the horse. Vivienne lunged forward. The frightened animal reared. The movement threw the kidnapper sideways. Leo slipped. A scream escaped Vivienne. Without hesitation, she threw herself into the mud. The baby fell directly into her arms. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Pain exploded through her shoulder. Yet she barely felt it. Leo was safe. The child clung to her immediately. His tiny hands grasped her soaked dress. The servant stumbled to his feet and rushed toward them. Vivienne curled protectively around Leo. The man stopped abruptly. Several lanterns suddenly appeared through the storm. Dozens. Search parties. Nathaniel's voice echoed through the darkness. Leo. The kidnapper fled instantly. Guards pursued him. Within minutes he disappeared beneath a wave of armed men. Nathaniel reached Vivienne first. For one terrible second he could not speak. She sat in the mud, drenched and trembling, with Leo held tightly against her chest. The sight nearly broke him. His son was alive. Vivienne was alive. Nothing else mattered. He dropped to his knees beside them. Leo reached toward him. Nathaniel gathered both of them into his arms. The storm continued raging around them. Yet for the first time all night, fear released its grip. They returned to Ashford Manor before dawn. The entire estate erupted with relief. Servants cried openly. Doctors examined Leo repeatedly. Eleanor embraced Vivienne with tears shining in her eyes. No one slept. No one wanted to. The nightmare had ended. By morning, news of the rescue had already begun spreading. Within days the entire kingdom knew what had happened. Newspapers abandoned their cruel rumors. Instead they printed stories of courage. Stories of sacrifice. Stories of the woman who had saved the Ashford heir not once, but twice. Public opinion transformed almost overnight. People who had mocked Vivienne now praised her. Children wrote letters thanking her. Families traveled long distances simply to catch a glimpse of her carriage. For the first time in her life, attention frightened her more than hardship ever had. Meanwhile, Nathaniel found himself confronting a truth he could no longer ignore. He loved her. Not because she had saved Leo. Not because Isabella trusted her. Not because fate had repeatedly drawn her into their lives. He loved her because every room became brighter when she entered it. Because kindness followed wherever she walked. Because she made people feel valued. Because Ashford Manor had become a home again after she arrived. One evening he intended to tell her. Instead, Vivienne spoke first. "We need to discuss the future." Nathaniel immediately sensed her concern. "What about it?" She looked toward children playing in the village beyond the manor gates. "There are so many who have no one." The statement surprised him. She continued quietly. "I spent so much time helping Leo that I began noticing others. Orphans. Abandoned children. Families with nowhere to turn." Nathaniel listened carefully. A vision slowly formed between them. Something larger than either of them. Weeks later he announced a grand celebration. Invitations spread across England. Nobles assumed the purpose was obvious. Everyone expected a wedding. Lady Beatrice certainly expected one. The entire kingdom did. When the day finally arrived, thousands gathered near Ashford Manor. Elegant carriages lined the roads. Reporters filled every available space. Excitement rippled through the crowd. Then Nathaniel stepped onto the grand platform. Vivienne stood beside him. Leo rested happily in Eleanor's arms. The Duke raised his hand for silence. "I once made a promise." The crowd quieted. "I said the woman who saved my son would become my Duchess." Everyone waited. Many expected a proposal. Instead, Nathaniel continued. "A Duchess should never be chosen because of a promise. She should be chosen because she is loved." Murmurs swept through the audience. Then he revealed the true purpose of the gathering. The Ashford Foundation. A massive organization dedicated to caring for orphaned and abandoned children throughout the kingdom. Gasps echoed everywhere. Nathaniel turned toward Vivienne. It was her idea. The applause began slowly. Then grew. Then thundered. People rose to their feet. Many wept. The foundation opened within months. Hundreds of children found safety. Then hundreds more. Schools were built. Homes were established. Entire futures changed. At the center of everything stood Vivienne. Not as a duchess. Not as a noblewoman. But as herself. The people gave her a new title. The People's Duchess. The name spread across England. She accepted it with humility. A year later, the foundation celebrated the opening of its largest orphanage. Gardens bloomed beneath summer sunlight. Children filled every pathway with laughter. No royal ballroom could have felt more magnificent. Vivienne spent the afternoon greeting families and helping children plant flowers. She had no idea Nathaniel had planned something special. As evening approached, the children suddenly gathered around her. Dozens of smiling faces formed a circle. Confusion touched her features. Then a familiar toddler emerged from the crowd. Little Leo. Now strong and healthy. A blue ribbon hung around his neck. Attached to it was a ring. The garden erupted with delighted laughter. Nathaniel stepped forward. For a moment neither spoke. The world seemed to fade around them. Only the two of them remained. Then he knelt. Not before nobles. Not before royalty. But before the children whose lives she had transformed. "I searched for someone to save my son," he said softly. "Instead, I found the woman who saved me too. Vivienne Hartwell, will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. Around them the children began chanting. "Say yes. Say yes. Say yes." Laughing through tears, Vivienne nodded. "Yes." Cheers exploded across the garden. Leo clapped enthusiastically. Nathaniel slipped the ring onto her finger. 1 year later, Ashford Manor stood brighter than it had in decades. Duke Nathaniel and Duchess Vivienne walked through sunlit gardens while Leo raced ahead beside dozens of adopted children laughing beneath flowering trees. The foundation continued changing lives across the kingdom, and hope flourished wherever its doors opened. Looking upon the family gathered before him, Nathaniel finally understood the miracle he had been given. He had searched desperately for a woman who could feed his child. Instead, he had found a woman who could feed an entire kingdom with love.